This is going to be a follow-up video to my How to Paint Firearm Parts series. I received a lot of email about that video, or the video series that is, and I had a lot of people ask me to do something other than just paint a flat color. So this is in response to my subscribers' requests. So using the techniques outlined in my previous series, I started with three Magpul items: a mid-length handguard, a Magpul MOE stock, and a Magpul MOE pistol grip. Now I could have started with black items and then painted them, but in my experience I found that if you start with a black item and you're painting it a light color, if it gets chipped down the road, it's real noticeable because the black shows through. So for this exercise I chose to go with flat dark earth Magpul items. The flat dark earth is not the exact same color as I painted these. I painted these a desert tan, and I did a pseudo tiger stripe pattern on it, and it doesn't adhere to any patterns or any how-tos. It's just something I came up with. So taking these items, I wish I probably should have did a how-to, but I got caught up in the moment and didn't video the procedures. But we start out with these items and we will mask them off. And as you can see, what I'm kind of focusing in on here is this is the area that actually slides on to the lower receiver. And this area is actually, when it fits on a lower receiver, it fits kind of tight. So the one thing I don't like to do is put a bunch of paint or a bunch of clear coat in these areas, because it's going to make the fit even tighter or impossible, and the tight fit's going to scrape the paint off. So I mask off all of these areas. These areas are not seen. These are areas that come in contact with the lower receiver, so I mask those off. And you can see the color variance between the desert tan and the flat dark earth. The desert tan's a lot lighter. I also do not paint on the inside. This plug is still in place. I took the plug out and masked off on the inside. Mainly because if you decide to use a grip core, the same principle applies. The tolerances could get a little bit too tight. So it's simple enough just to use some blue painter's tape and mask off on the inside, and I've got the entire bottom painted desert tan, so it looks good with a plug or just this filler piece. So after masking off these areas, what you need to normally do is you got to figure out some way to hold on to this. And if you notice, there's the holes right there for the screws. So what I did was I got a long bolt, and I put the nut on the other end, slid this through, screwed it down tight. So I actually had something to hold on to. So I can hold this while I'm painting, and I don't have to stick my fingers in here or try and hold on to this, because when you're painting you want to be able to hold this and get all the little areas and the nooks and crannies covered with paint as well as clear coat. So being innovative and coming up with something like this, I mean, you don't even need to use a screw, a little dowel or a stick or something would work. Just whatever you can get in there and secure it so this obviously doesn't fall off during the process. The first step, obviously, going back to my previous how to paint videos, is we mask off our areas we don't want painted. We use a liberal amount of wax and grease remover to remove any contaminants from the surface, and we'll wet sand it or you can wet sand it first and then use the wax and grease remover. I don't think that makes a heck of a lot of difference. When I'm wet sanding, when I'm done wet sanding, I'll normally wash the piece down with some dishwashing liquid, Dawn or something like that, because technically that's a wax and grease remover too. So wax and grease remover, sanding, masking off our areas, and then it's, you know, on to painting. To do this tiger stripe design, I experimented with the tiger stripe on the flat dark earth, and it just didn't really look like tiger stripe. Tiger stripe really needed a lighter color, so that's why I chose this desert tan. And it's a flat desert tan color, and the black is a flat black as well. Automotive type paints, or, you know, Krylon will work. The Krylon Fusion's a good paint. You can get automotive grade paints in a can. You can get Durcoat in a can. You know, you've got some good options out there for stuff in a can. And if you're hardcore, you know, you've got your own compressor and your airlines and airline filters and your spray guns. You can go down to your automotive paint place, get some paint in a can, get the hardener, get the clear, get the hardener, the whole deal, and mix it up yourself and shoot that. That's beyond the scope of most people's abilities for doing a small project like this, so I don't normally go into it. And I don't have a compressor, so that's the grip. After painting this desert tan, I let it dry for an appropriate amount of time, you know, which is normally, you know, 1 to 4 hours. It depends on the type of paint, until you can actually handle it. And then I went back in with the blue painter's tape. That's the 3M blue painter's tape, and wrapped the entire surface. I wrapped absolutely everything and smoothed it down so the paint covered absolutely all the areas. And then it's just a simple matter of going in with a pen and drawing some sort of pseudo tiger stripes, or if you wanted to do a digital pattern, maybe some little squares. And the only thought I put into it was, which way do I want the stripes to go? And I kind of decided on having all the stripes kind of go up and to the left for whatever reason. That's just kind of how I decided to do it. And just drew a bunch of squigglies and tried not to be create any type of specific pattern. I tried to use different sizes and thicknesses so it looked kind of random, like, you know, the stripes on a tiger. And once it's drawn out, the most meticulous part of this is going in with a knife and cutting out the pattern. Now, this is the X-Acto knife I use. It's called Fiskar. The logic behind this is it's small, and it gives you some precise control over cutting fine surfaces. It's kind of hard to be real fluid and cut these things without it looking jagged. And in some of these areas, it is kind of jagged because it's kind of hard to do circles with an X-Acto knife. And ideally, you want to just press hard enough to cut through the tape. You don't really want to dig too far into the paint. It's kind of unavoidable, but you know, you'll figure out how much pressure you need. Change the blade often. I used a new blade for each one of these items because I wanted to have definitely a sharp blade at all times. That means less pressure that I have to apply to cut the tape. And once you've cut the tape, you go in and remove the part that you cut out. And you may need to go back in and trim some little corners because sometimes the tape doesn't peel away clear or clean. And trim a little bit of the corners and dig it out and make sure you don't have any residual little pieces of tape floating around on there. And then once that's completed and you're happy with your cutouts and it's looking good, it's just a matter of going back in with your favorite color. In this case, I chose flat black, and using the same painting techniques, apply some flat black. The stock, you can do the stock several ways. I removed this rubber butt plate back here, and I also removed this handle. The handle's a little bit trickier to remove. There is a roll pin right here, and you need to hammer out the roll pin, and the roll pin holds a spring in, and when you get the roll pin out, the spring will come out, and this bar right here, which is notched, and the spring holds it in place. Once the spring comes out, that little bar will drop out, and then the pin assembly drops out. Now, getting this piece off is a little bit more challenging because it's kind of spread apart and popped over what looks like a pin here, but it's actually part of this stock. And it can be done, but in hindsight, you know, the reason I removed it is that, you know, when you push down on this, if I hadn't removed this area up in here would be the original color. So I wanted everything painted desert tan, everything that would be visible. That's why I went to the all the trouble of removing that. It wasn't that big of a deal to me, and but getting it back on there was a little bit more challenging. And on this same thing, you know, covered the entire thing with tape. And doing the stock is a little bit more, can be a little bit more challenging because, you know, like I decided to do, put a little paint in these little areas, and you've got to get masking tape down there and try and cut it out. If I was to do this again, I probably would not do these areas. I would just maybe do something here, here, and here. I wouldn't do this. It was a little bit more work to try and get the paint down in there and keep it consistent. And of course I did a little bit of a tiger stripe pattern here on the lever. I did nothing down here. I don't know why, I just didn't. So that's the stock. The mid-length handguard, I painted these as separate pieces. You pop them apart, and you can see here that you know, this area right here, which comes in contact with the lower part of the handguard, I masked that off so you can see that that's flat dark earth still, but when pushed together you don't really see that. So I painted the two halves separately. I masked off all of the inside areas. We've got the metal heat shield. I masked that. This comes black like this. I masked off this area, and I masked off the inside. One of the things I found painting things like a handguard, if you get a bunch of paint and clear coat on the inside of here and you put your gun together and you start shooting it, it starts heating up, it starts smelling like burning paint. So that's why I try to not paint these surfaces on specifically like on the inside of a handguard. And also the surfaces that come in contact with your barrel nut assembly or your front sight post. These areas you can still see are flat dark earth. That's mainly because these areas come in contact with other surfaces, so I didn't want to put paint on those. The other half, you can see the whole inside is still flat dark earth. I masked that all off. And when it was, after it was done, when I was done painting it, I went ahead and assembled the entire handguard. Again, wrapping the whole thing with blue painter's tape, and then going in with the X-Acto knife or a pen and drawing out some patterns, and then going in with the X-Acto knife and cutting them out, and then applying the flat black paint. And when everything was all done, after the appropriate cure period for the black, I went back in with an automotive grade clear coat and clear coated everything. So there's a nice protective finish over it. And Obviously I haven't installed this yet, but I think that's about all I can really say on the topic at this point. If I actually get a firearm I can use this on, I might build another firearm and install these components on a firearm so you can see what they look like. I suspect they're gonna look pretty good on an AR, a black AR that is. I was kicking around the idea of building an AR with a flat dark earth, lower receiver, and upper receiver, but it's really tough to get unless you paint everything at once. Those colors have a tendency never to match. So I think if I put these components on a rifle, I'm going to put them on a solid black rifle, black upper, black lower, black buffer tube, black barrel, and so on. And I'll report back, or I'll do a video on that. So wrapping up this video, again, pretty easy to take some common components, and with a little ingenuity and a little bit of work, you can customize them relatively inexpensive. I mean, we're talking, if you want a rattle can, you're talking a couple of cans of paint and a can of clear coat, and some painter's tape, an X-Acto knife, and a bit of your time, and you can get pretty creative. There you go.